Alex-Laurențiu. I work in the National Cybersecurity Directorate, and I would like to start by thanking the sponsors of this event and the organizers for the great job they did. And today we'll talk about the deepfake threat and potential actions. First of all, I'd like to start by saying a few things about the National Cybersecurity Directorate. We are the national level competent authority for national civilian cyberspace, including management of risks and cyber incidents. We are created under the government and serve under direct coordination of the Prime Minister. We are the national CERT and also governmental CERT. We are responsible for coordination, implementation, guidance, and support of sectorial CERTs, in also alerting, prevention, awareness, training functions, cooperation, collaborations that ensure the cooperation framework to carry out specific cybersecurity activities, research, information exchange, training, education, awareness, project development. Here we have the agenda. We'll have a brief talk about the deepfake. After that, I chose this study because I believe it's really relevant right now. And after that, we'll talk a bit about what we did at the directorate level in this area. Today we stand on the cliff of a technological revolution that has the potential to reshape our reality in profound and unprecedented ways. The rise of deepfake technology represents a paradigm shift in the manipulation of digital media, offering both extraordinary opportunities and daunting challenges for our society, security, and democracy. In this comprehensive discourse, I aim to delve deeply into the multifaceted landscape of deepfakes, exploring their origins, capabilities, implications, and strategies we must adopt to navigate this brave new world. Deepfake is a synthetic media generated by artificial intelligence algorithms known as deep neural networks. These algorithms analyze and manipulate large data sets of images and videos to create highly realistic simulation of human faces and voices, enabling the fabrication of content that is indistinguishable from authentic footage to the untrained eye. The technology underlying deepfakes has its roots in the field of deep learning, a subset of machine learning inspired by structure and function of the human brain. By leveraging neural networks with multiple layers of interconnected nodes, researchers have developed algorithms capable of learning complex patterns and generating novel content with astonishing accuracy and fidelity. The origins of deepfake technology can be traced back to 2010s, when researchers began experimenting with generative adversarial networks, the GANs, a type of neural network architectures designed to generate synthetic data by pitting two neural networks against each other in a competitive learning process. Initially, deepfake was primarily used for benign purposes, such as facial reenactment in film production and entertainment. However, as technology became more accessible and sophisticated, its potential for misuse became increasingly apparent. The proliferation of deepfake technology has given rise to a wide range of applications across various domains, from entertainment and filmmaking to journalism, education, and beyond. In the entertainment industry, deepfake is being used to seamlessly insert actors' faces into scenes, resurrect deceased celebrities, and create hyper-realistic digital avatars for video games and virtually filmmaking. Similarly, in the realm of journalism and documentaries, deepfake have been employed to recreate historical events, simulate interviews with public figures, and illustrate complex concepts through visual storytelling. However, alongside this positive application, deepfakes also pose significant ethical, social, and political challenges. One of the most pressing concerns is the potential for deepfake to be weaponized as a tool for misinformation and propaganda. With the ability to fabricate convincing videos of public figures saying or doing things they never actually did, malicious actors could exploit deepfake technology to manipulate public opinion, sow discord, and undermine trust in institutions and media. In an era where the spread of misinformation is already rampant, the proliferation of deepfakes threatens to exacerbate existing societal division and erode the foundation of democratic discourse. In addition to their impact on public discourse and democracy, deepfakes also pose significant threats to individual privacy and security. With the ability to superimpose someone's likeness onto explicit or compromising content, malicious actors could weaponize deepfake technology to harass, blackmail, or defame individuals, causing irreparable harm to their reputation and livelihoods. Moreover, the proliferation of deepfakes raises urgent questions about the need for robust legal and technological safeguards to protect individuals from the malicious use of their personal data and likeness. Furthermore, deepfakes have profound implications for journalism and information integrity. In an age where trust in traditional media is waning, the proliferation of deepfake technology threatens to erode the credibility of visual evidence and undermine the public's ability to discern fact from fiction. Journalists and media organizations must adapt to this new reality by developing rigorous fact-checking protocols, educating the public about the danger of digital manipulation, and embracing emerging technologies for detecting and verifying the authenticity of digital content. From a national security perspective, deepfakes present many challenges for governments and intelligence agencies tasked with detecting and countering disinformation campaigns. The ability of hostile actors to deploy convincing deepfakes as part of psychological warfare operations could have destabilizing effects on geopolitical relations and exacerbate existing tensions between nations. As such, there is an urgent need for international cooperation and coordination to develop strategies for combating the proliferation of deepfake technology and mitigating its potential consequences for global security. Considering these challenges, the responsible development and deployment of deepfake technology require a multifaceted approach that addresses both technical and ethical considerations. On the technical front, researchers and engineers must continue to innovate in the fields of computer vision, natural language processing, and machine learning to develop more robust algorithms for detecting and authenticating deepfake content. Similarly, policymakers and regulators must work to establish clear legal frameworks and ethical guidelines for the creation and dissemination of synthetic media, balancing the need to protect individual privacy and security with the principles of free expression and artistic freedom. Moreover, addressing the societal impact of deepfakes requires a concerted effort to empower individuals with the knowledge and skills they need to navigate the digital landscape safely and responsibly. By promoting digital literacy and critical thinking skills, we can empower citizens to identify and evaluate the credibility of digital content, resist manipulation and misinformation, and engage in informed civic discourse. This includes educating the public about the technique used to create deepfakes, raising awareness about the potential risks of consequences of their misuse, and providing resources and tools for verifying the authenticity of digital media. The rise of deepfake technology represents a watershed moment in the evolution of digital media, one that demands careful consideration and proactive action from policymakers, technologists, and citizens alike. While the proliferation of the deepfakes poses significant challenges for our society, security, and democracy, it also offers exciting opportunities for innovation, creativity, and artistic expression. By fostering a culture of digital literacy, promoting ethical guidelines for the creation and dissemination of synthetic media, and investing in innovation, detection, and verification technologies, we can harness the potential of deepfakes while safeguarding against their darker implications. The choices we make today will shape the future of our society for generations to come. Now I would like to talk about what happened with the Slovak elections, where on sources it said that deepfakes changed the winner of the presidential elections. During the election campaign, videos featuring AI-generated fake voices of politicians spread on social media, demonstrating how emerging technology was leveraged for political disinformation. The clips were shared on platforms like Meta and Instagram, as well as messaging apps like Telegram. One such video showed a 2-minute conversation where the leader of the Progressive Party, Michal Slimeca, appeared to be discussing buying votes from the Roma minority with a journalist. AFP fact-checkers consulted several experts who concluded that the audio was synthesized using an AI tool trained on real samples of speakers' voices. These were circulated on social media without labels identifying them as deceptive. A spokesperson for Meta stated that although posts from political parties are not eligible for the fact-checking, Meta Slovakian fact-checkers continue to actively debunk false claims related to the election circulating online. Telegram did not respond to requests for comments. As the recording was posted during a 48-hour silence period before the polls opened, when media and politicians are supposed to remain silent, it was difficult to widely debunk the post. 3 days before elections, Meta informed the Demagogue team, a Meta fact-checking consultant, about an audio recording in which the liberal leader Slimeca proposed doubling the price of beer in case of victory. Slimeca denied the claim. Consequently, Veronika Hinkova, a project manager from Demagogue, initiated an investigation. Her team tracked the source of recording and found it was first posted on an anonymous Instagram account. They consulted experts to determine if the recording was fake or manipulated and eventually used an AI speech classifier by 11 Labs, concluding that the recording was altered. They labeled the content, which was viewable on Facebook in Slovak, indicating that independent fact-checkers say this photo or image has been edited in a way that could mislead people. Ben Walter, a Meta spokesperson, said, "When content is fact-checked, we label it and downgrade it in the feed, so fewer people see it. Our community standards apply to all content, whether created by AI or a person, and we will take action against content that violates these policies." Besides the 2 deepfake audio recordings, 2 other videos with AI-generated audio imitations were posted on social media by far-right party Republica. One imitated Michal Slimeca, and the other the country's president, Zuzana Kaputova. These recordings included statements noting the voices were fictional, but only after 15 seconds of the 20-second videos, which experts believe was an attempt to deceive listeners. The fake video later appeared on Telegram and gained wider coverage after being shared on Facebook by Peter Marcek. Experts estimate up to 100,000 users saw it. According to Statista, Facebook has about 3.5 million users in Slovakia. Simultaneously, the Russian Secret Service chief, Sergei Narishkin, accused the US of electoral interference during the two-day pre-election silence. The same narrative was presented by Stefan Harabin on Russian state television the next day. On September 28, just after noon, the video made its way from Gabika Haas' hidden account to Stefan Harabin's public channel. According to Telegram statistics, the video on Harabin's channel was viewed by over 13,000 users and shared nearly 500 times, including private messages shares. The Hybrid Threats Combating Center of the Ministry of the Interior analyzed the video's distribution and found that it could significantly impact the election's credibility. Analysts identified Telegram as a primary source of further distribution, with the video spreading to several Slovak groups and channels, then to TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube, estimating over 5,000 cumulative reshares. It was also disseminated through email chains. The Slovak Media Services Council intervened, alerting relevant platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, which later blocked or deleted the problematic content. However, Telegram, which is minimally regulated, still hosts the video. According to the Dial, a week before the recording began circulating, 30% of voters were still undecided. Journalist Monika Todova, who has been repeatedly questioned, threatened, and harassed by politicians whose corruption she exposed, initially dismissed the fake conversation as absurd and poorly fabricated. The recording, lasting 2 minutes and 13 seconds, included unnatural pauses and intonations, betraying its fraudulent creation. Slovak law prohibits electoral campaigning 48 hours before elections. During this electoral silence, the media and government were barred from making specific statements about the deepfake. Authorities could only state that it was related to a party leader in the campaign. The Slovak Policy's Facebook page issued a vague warning: be aware of fake videos and recordings generated with AI. The European Commission, through Vice President Vera Jourova, has shed light on the unprecedented wave of disinformation that marred the recent elections in Slovakia. With the proliferation of falsified content, including a deepfake video featuring Michal Slimeca, president of Progressive Slovakia Party, the integrity of electoral process has been called into question. Despite the acceptance of the election result, it is imperative to acknowledge the pervasive influence of disinformation campaigns, which have been documented extensively within the EU. The investigation conducted by Jan Kuciak Investigative Center has revealed the intricate web of deceit surrounding the dissemination of deepfake video. This fabricated recording purportedly depicted a conversation between journalist Monika Todova and Mikhail Slimeca, was strategically distributed via various social media platforms, including Telegram, Facebook, and YouTube. The video, also debunked as fraudulent, managed to reach a wide audience, sowing seeds of doubt and discord in the lead-up to the elections. The role of political figures in amplifying this disinformation campaign cannot be overlooked. Notably, individuals such as former Supreme Court President Stefan Harabin and former Deputy Peter Marcek played a significant role in disseminating the deepfake video, thereby exacerbating the erosion of trust in democratic processes. Furthermore, the complicity of state actors such as Russian Federation in perpetuating narratives of electoral interferences underscores the multifaceted nature of this threat. The involvement of Russian intelligence services, as highlighted by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, serves as a stark reminder of the geopolitical implications of disinformation campaigns. In response to these challenges, collaborative efforts between governmental institutions and civil society organizations have been instrumental in mitigating the impact of disinformation. The proactive measures undertaken by Slovak Ministry of Interior in collaboration with media regulatory bodies demonstrate a concerted effort to safeguard the integrity of democratic institutions. In conclusion, the events surrounding the Slovak elections serve as a sobering reminder of the pernicious influence of disinformation on democratic processes. As we confront these challenges, it is incumbent upon us to remain vigilant and uphold the principles of transparency, accountability, and integrity in our electoral systems. And now I would like to talk about our internal struggle to try to do something in this area. Even if it is not in our area of this, except it includes all scam actions combined with cyber threats. The deepfakes is not our responsibility. But seeing there is nothing done, we try to create a guide to educate people not to believe everything they see. We started the guide with a definition and some examples of the deepfakes. And after that, we proceeded to importance of the understanding deepfake. Understanding deepfakes is crucial due to their significant implications in society, politics, cybersecurity, and public trust. And we have truth and trust. Deepfakes can distort reality, creating highly realistic content that is hard to distinguish from genuine material, undermining trust in media and information. Security and fraud. Deepfakes can produce false recordings implicating individuals in activity they did not engage in or provide false evidence in legal context. They can also be used in fraud attempts, such as identity falsification in phone or video calls. Also, manipulation and misinformation in politics and other fields. Deepfakes can manipulate public opinion, discredit opponents, or create confusion, potentially influencing elections and international relations. On the social and ethical area, also have a significant impact. Immoral use of deepfake technology to create compromising materials or online harassment raises serious ethical and individual rights concerns. Social and ethical impact. Preparation for the future. As technology advances, deepfakes will become more sophisticated and harder to detect. Understanding their operation and identification is essential for developing technologies and strategies to counter their malicious use. Education and awareness. Educating the public about deepfakes can mitigate their impact by increasing healthy skepticism towards dubious content and encouraging verification from multiple sources. Right now, I'd like to, one second. This is what we were able to do. In the process of creating this, we found out that the most important thing in this area is the education, because people are not able to see or identify not even the budget cost created fakes. And a lot of people were affected by the, we have fakes with the governor of the national bank coming and saying to, people to invest in different scams, and also with the other important characters from Romania. We also put in the guides some science that can be looked after when you try to see if the information is genuine or is a deep fake. Right now we are also collaborating with the institutions in Romania and the Romanian parliament in order to create a legislative policy that would regulate the area. We found it's really hard to agree on something, and would also be interested in what is your opinion on this subject. Any questions?
Hello, so I couldn't notice but see some parallels between your talk and Jason Street's talk from yesterday. And he said that the best way to defend against cyber attacks is to train situational awareness, not just cyber awareness. Now, in this context, what would be your number one lesson to teach to the general public, so not technical, to avoid being deceived by things like this?
In my opinion, the first thing to do when you see something you're not sure about is to check it. Double check it, triple check it, found reliable sources that provide information on that subject. If you cannot find anything on it, in the majority cases, it's a scam, it's a fake, it's something in order to induce. That's what I think. And the most important, I say again and again, it's education. Prepare people to be able to accept that these things are happening, because it's not. It's a huge amount of people that think everything is online is true. It also may represent a huge problem if sometime in the future, it's not going to happen today, but somewhere in the future it might, accepting there are a lot of fakes, people will stop trusting the internet. And that might be the end of the internet. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hello, 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 hello. And for those of you that think there was too many hellos, hey, hello. So, how's been DefCamp? All good? Hacking Village, speakers, nice sessions? Well, hopefully you had fun, because we're about to end the fun after this session, and also the award ceremony for the, anyway, the DefCamp award ceremony. Welcome. If you're at the wrong talk, Jason is that way. But you're here at Log4j-MX. It's a bit too late to go out. The doors have been locked. We're going to present Log4j-MX, the vulnerability that never existed. What's a Log4j-MX? How can you present something that never existed? I don't know. We'll find out in the session. So, short disclaimer before we begin. My opinions happen to be my own. I don't know. Maybe I borrowed them from someone else. And the memes, yes, they belong to ImageFlip. So with that, we can begin. My name is Matei Malbădănoiu. I have been hacking stuff for 8 years, been professionally hacking stuff for 6.5 years, or 6.5. And I have managed to collect about 100 0 days or CVs, which I responsibly disclosed to Oracle, Cisco, Apache, etc. All of you got all that? Yep, perfect. Forget everything. So, 2 things you need to know about me. My name is Matthew, and I like hacking stuff. So, let's get to hacking stuff. So, an intro, because we should. In the beginning of 2023, I reported to security@apache.com the following things. Log4j exposes the following dangerous mbeans through JMX by default. Set config text, configuration location URI, get config text, and config text. We're going to develop on them later, but this is for the TLDR. By the Log4j team, this was not a vulnerability, not their problem. But they said in a mail to me, private, that we're going to look over it and we're going to probably not register mbeans by default. So I am a fan of actions, not words, but it has been patched. It's not a vulnerability. We can forget about them, right? It's been patched, right? Right. Okay, so let's look at the actions that they actually took. Exhibit A, dear jury. So on their official website, we can see the following. JMX support is enabled by default. And please keep in the back of your mind this following parameter. Log4j2 disable JMX needs to be set to true in order to not enable mbeans by default. Okay, we're going to make references to them. Exhibit B, because again, those were just words in Exhibit A. We took the latest version of Log4j. I think 2 weeks ago I did. We didn't do any shenanigans. We just instantiated a log manager get logger. That's all you need to do. You need to set up a whole JMX command in order to execute the JMX server, but these are Java-specific things. They're not specific to Log4j. And we just open a JConsole to see what happens. In this JConsole, we can see the following things. We have our Apache Log4j type something. It's a hex that is generated randomly at runtime, so you need to find it every time. And the mbeans, which we mentioned earlier, are by default present. So, How can we exploit this? Or how hard is it? It's not very hard at all. If you have JConsole, you have the graphical user interface, you just go to the function you want to call, let's say setConfig text. In this case, we're going to write 4 A's to the configuration, and the encoding will be UTF-8. It doesn't matter, it can be ISO, whatever. But anyway, for someone's disappointment, 4 A's are not a valid XML. So we actually need to write a valid configuration. But that's how simple we can change the configuration of log4j remotely. So with this being said, dear jury, having Exhibit A and Exhibit B, I have just one thing to say. Objection. So let's go for the introduction again. From the top. Patched, question mark? I say not. We can consider that the response from the log4j team never existed. Anyway, TLDR, RC is back on the menu, boys. So let's start with an introduction of log4j. What is it? If you look on their website, they have some very nice statistics. It's considered a top 100 critical open source software. And this is, in my personal case, so they have a team of volunteers that is handling this software. It's a very nice software. The volunteers are doing a great job. They have my respect for it. I salute the brave volunteers, but I'm still going to roast their security process. So, log4j for hackers. They have too many functionalities. I mean, I have spent more time on the documentation than actually implementing the exploits themselves. So we can read files, write files. We can have database support. We can have script support directly. And we also have these automatic MBeans which are logged in JMX or JMX adjacent software. And of course, before 2021, you probably heard of it, there was a small debacle with log4j which allowed remote JNDI. So we're going to talk about these old attacks because we need to know our history in order to attack our future. And these are the 3 notable JNDI acceptors. So we have patterns, we have database connectors, and we have JMSs. I do not remember what the acronym for JMS is, but you'll find that out. So how did they protect themselves? They made the following protections. They had log4j. These need to be set up as secure parameters in the Java application, environmental applications, environmental variables. So we have log4j to enable JNDI lookup, log4j to enable JNDI JDBC, and enable JNDI JMS, and disable JMX. You can probably notice where I'm going with it if you remember. So yeah, they also rewrote the JNDI manager in order to prevent LDAP or RMI connections. Now you're only allowed to access local resources with the Java protocol, which just gives you out some system variables from the Java virtual machine environment. But anyway, let's look at these configurations or malicious JNDI attacks. If some of you are having PTSD from the end of 2020, then your instincts are right. This is probably something you have heard about. It's Log4Shell. It should seem familiar. And yes, some of you may have threatened someone with it or have been threatened by it. And of course, we can go over the database source. Again, we just pointed to an arbitrary LDAP, and the same with the JMS, the provider URL LDAP, and that be it. Now, in the current Log4j, these do not work anymore. Again, the JNDI manager prevents LDAP or other remote connections. But let's look at the current attacks for Log4j, which still work to this day. So, as I mentioned, we have the following interesting MBeans, functions or operations as they're called in Java MBeans, the setConfig, getConfig, and the attributes config location URI. The first one is read-writable, so we can modify it. The other one is just readable, but we can extract sensitive information from it. So the attacks themselves, what are we interested in doing? We are interested in modifying runtime configurations of Log4j in order to do the following possible attacks. We can read arbitrary files from the system, just point log config location URI to a file 2.// etc/passwd, and that's it. Okay, and we get the output through config text and or the get config text string. And if we want to write file, which is the interesting part, we can just point config location URI to our malicious HTTP or FTP server where we're hosting our XML file or another type of configuration file. Or we can just set it with setconfig text, just write the string there, the whole XML payload, which can be kilometers long. It doesn't matter, it works. And we can also leverage functionalities directly. Depending what scripts you have enabled, that's direct remote code execution. And if you have database drivers, some attacks may apply. So let's start with reading files. I know, reading files is boring, but sometimes it's the only thing you can do. So let's at least see what shenanigans can be entailed from them. Reading files. Steps, as mentioned before, we point config location URI to wherever we want to, and then we read the content with either config text or get config text. What can we read? Well, we can read, of course, local files, obvious. We can read remote files through FTP and SMB in Windows environments. And, of course, we would have liked to read files over FTP, but, through HTTP, but unfortunately, these are blocked. So we can only do blind get-based SSRFs with them. Let's read local files, because we heard about the theory. Let's see it in action. This is a Jolokia endpoint and a HTTP request. As you can see in the image, we're just pointing the config location URI to file // etc passwd. And by also requesting in another request the content of either the mbin itself or the, getconfig.txt, we can get the following things of interest. We can see our file content there, and this is what still bothers me to this day. We set it to etc passwd, but we have the file pointing to its default location. So this is probably a nightmare for anyone that is trying from the blue team to find out what happened. But then again, we have our configuration text which contains the content of our etc passwd, so we as attacker are happy. How about a graphical representation of what happened? Because that was over HTTP. So it's a bit small, but you can probably read it. We just set the configuration URI to file etc passwd, and we get the content in config.txt. It's the same thing as above, but through the JMX protocol, not through HTTP. So let's read files remotely over FTP. If you happen to know the IP address and the username and password for a sensitive file in the internal network, you can set the config URI to FTP, which is the protocol, mal, which is the user, SUMPass, which is the password, and the IP and port of the FTP server, and of course the file name in order to get the content. We as attacker can use this to serve complex configuration payloads, but you can also read files of the FTP if you know the necessary information. In this case, we just hosted a PyFTP lib FTP server. We connected to it. The content of exfil.txt is exfil this file, because why bother with something complicated? And we can see it as a pop-up from getconfig.txt. Think about the alert from web, but it contains the content of the file, the content we wanted to exfiltrate. So how about SMB, or file ////? Yes, those are 4 slashes, and it's good because I can only count to 4. So did someone say Samba? If you don't get the reference, Google it. I'm not gonna, anyway. So if we look over the same config location URI, the same idea, we put a UNC path there, so // the IP we wanted to connect to, which is our malicious SMB, the share name, and the file we want to exfiltrate, or it can be anything. The fun part with this is if you host an in-packet server, you can get back the hash of the user that is running this service or the software. So if you want to crack the hash locally, or if the the Windows environment is misconfigured to not accept SMB signatures, you can just NTLM relay that attack. What can happen with NTLM relay? Well, it can be something as simple as reading files off the share if you don't have any elevated privileges, or if you happen to be admin on the target, then guess what? You get remote code execution as anti-authority system. So yeah, nothing bad. Okay, and HTTP server-side request forgery. Unfortunately, we're blind, as I told you. So as much as I like to tell you, you can get your cloud metadata endpoints, tokens, and all your internal HTTP server responses. Unfortunately, you cannot. You can still attack internal HTTP servers if you know they are vulnerable to get-based parameter attack. But yeah, unfortunately, we cannot read through it. So let's go for a simple example. We set the config location URI to an HTTP path. We set up our HTTP server just to simulate that it gets back to us. And unfortunately for us, although we get the get parameters, which are test SSRF, we do not get the output of the file. We get a very nasty exception of Java lang null pointer exception. This does not bother us if we want to serve malicious configuration, but it does hinder us if we want to read the content from the HTTP response. And yes, the whole error looks something like this. But wait, there is more. So this is the same thing as before, but what I like about it very much is that you can do this in script files. So if scripts are enabled, then you get remote code execution. That's not the problem. The problem is that if you see that language whatever, that's not a valid language. And also the path is HTTP whatever. So this is how the whole XML would look like. This is how the attack environment would happen. But we are interested in two things in the debugging log. First, it got our it got our configuration over HTTP. So again, although we cannot read the files, we can send malicious configurations to log4j. But the interesting part is in the lower part, where it tells us that it created the script with language whatever, and then it gives us an error that provider HTTP is not installed. Yes, a big warning. But that warning amounts to nothing for us because we still got back our SSRF request. And the concerning part about this is the fact that you can think about the normal flow as this. You have script support, okay, continue. You have script support for that language, okay, continue. Get the file. That's how a normal flow should look like. This goes like this. Get the file, we'll see afterwards. So it doesn't matter if you have any script support or the language is invalid, you're still gonna get the SSRF back to you. So, writing files. This is the interesting part. So we have two methods of writing this file. We can continuously write, meaning every time an event happens, we just append it to the file continuously. This is good if you don't care about the format of the file or if you don't have a rigid file format structure, such as JSPs, authentication keys, and cron scripts. But if you want something more sophisticated and you have a file that actually requires a specific format, let's consider XML files, binary executables, or zip files, you need to do something a bit more complicated, and we'll get into it. And of course, you can write files over SMB. If you thought you're safe from NTLM replay attacks through the write vector, you're not. Okay, so I like to call this the caveman continuous write mode. You can think about bashing the software's skull in with the payloads. You're effectively going to write it an infinite number of times until the disk runs out of space. So in this case, we're going to write our malicious JSP to a relative location. It doesn't matter. We're going to get into it later. And in the pattern data, we can just write a runtime exec and just get remote code execution if everything is successful. The result will look something like this. It's a whole lot of winning going on there. And yes, at some point in time, getting over 1,000 commands being executed at the same time may just crash the system. So it works, but it's not that pretty, and it may crash the system. It's a form of modern torture, like the image over here. So let's go for the sophisticated route. Let's log rotate. We can do this by creating a rolling file instead of a simple file. Again, the file name can be any path. We need to add a file pattern, which will be where our files will be archived. And we also, in this case, set append to false, because we do not care what the file was initially. We just want to overwrite it and get this over with. Just put our malicious payloads there. Again, in the pattern, we can put anything we want. You can XML encode it as shown here, or you can use C data as shown in the previous example. And what makes this trick work is that we do a size-based trigger policy. That means that when the file is written, if it has the size bigger than 1, you archive it, you write just the text you need, and then again, when you need to write again, you archive that file and just write only what is needed, nothing more. So it works great for files that actually need to be in a specific format. We also have a tangent for this. You can control file permissions directly from log4j. So if you want to write something like authorized keys, then you probably know that you need to have a permission of 400 or 600 for it to work. Else, it does not work. So log4j accommodates us with that. We can just log into SSH afterwards. We're good. We're golden. And of course, as I was telling you, writing over SMB, we just uncpath it, and that's it. We get the hash of the user that is running the service. Now, for the complicated part. We have, until now, been writing files that are text. How would we write a binary content file? So let me give you a preview of the limitations we're working with. In XML, at least the XML configurations, the XML format does only allow a specific set of characters, which is this one. You might notice from it that you have no null bytes, no 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever. These are all valid bytes that are used in executables, especially null bytes. There are a lot of them. So therefore, we cannot directly write executables, wars, jars, and etc. In theory, we could bypass these these restrictions using multi-byte characters. For example, Cafe Bebe, which is the header for Java compiled files, can be written this way using a UTF-16 encoded, and we can theoretically insert some null bytes, but if you're handling groups of null bytes, for example, null, 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 then you have no chance of writing it. And yeah, depending on the files you want to write, it is not impossible to do it, but Luke, it is highly improbable. So, how can we bypass this? Log4j has 4 configuration formats. The default is XML, but the most used one is properties, which is just text-based. You can just write binary files in it. There's also JSON and YAML, which are less frequently met. But again, you just \u encode them or \x encode them, and you have no problems. Just XML is the only problem child out of this configuration format. So how does a writing binary content attack work? Or how does it look like? This would be our property files, which contains text. In this case, we're going to add all characters from 0 to FF, or from 0 to 256, actually 255, to the pattern we want to write. We also need to encode it as Latin 1, which is ISO 8859-1. Anyway, if you use UTF-8, you're going to have a bad time. And the result should look something like this. We have all characters from 0 to FF written very nicely in a file of our choice. Okay, how can we actually exploit this? If you have more complex files, you have more bad characters, so you need to look over what's happening. But if everything is successful, you should get, for example, this web archive. We took it from one location, we wrote it to another location through log4j, and if we do a diff between them, there should be no difference. There's no difference between these pictures. Anyway, if you have a difference, then something went wrong due to the special character parsing in log4j patterns. But if you have no difference, that's great. Your exploit works. And again, because we have bad characters, we're messing with binary files and whatever. This feels more like a pawn challenge than a web challenge. But bear with me, please. And script support. This is direct remote code execution. If you happen to have scripts anywhere enabled, then you're gonna suffer. So there are multiple components which support scripts. These scripts only work if script support is specifically enabled. Again, it is disabled by default. Disable JMX. Sorry for the cough I've been having for the last days. And of course, we have the supported scripts. We have JavaScript, Groovy, Bean Shell. All of these are common. I think they also support JRuby and Jython, but you need separate libraries, and I'm not completely sure about that, but these 3 usually are the most commonly met. So this is how a script support XML should look like. We're going to write in our script filter the language JavaScript, name anything, and we're going to write our runtime get runtime exec command for whatever we want, just remote code execution directly. Okay. Also, database connections. So for the Java database connections, Log4j does not come by default with any database connectors. But the official documentation from their GitHub, which can be found in the link in the corner, has the following example, the H2 database example. And if you ever worked with it, you can just create Java classes at runtime in this init parameter. So if you do not want to write the whole payload, which is create Java class, I don't know what, you can just say run script from HTTP location and just host your malicious file there, and you get remote code execution. But again, default log4j is not vulnerable to this, but some maybe. Okay. Of course, the Java messaging extension, I have talked about this at another presentation, and we're going to go fast over it. So it's an extension over RMI. It fetches records, so you know what classes and functions you have available. And a normal flow would be like you as a client have no idea what the logic behind your functions is. You just have a stub function. You send the parameters and the function name to the server, and then you get back the response. You don't care what's happening you do care what's happening in the backend, but you have no idea. It's a black box, and you just get back a response. Of course, I'll say this once and again, and every 1,000 times required when I present about JMX. If you have it unauthenticated and exposed anywhere, you're going to have a quick but painful def by mlets. I don't know if you know the second word, but the first, def, you should. So it's bad. It's very, very bad. If you want more information about this, you can find it at my presentation from DefCamp Bucharest from last year, which is 5 shades of Java exploitation, but let's continue. So the major security concerns with JMX are pre-authenticated deserialization, unauthenticated mlet installing, and post-authenticated shenanigans. So we are only interested in the first two, the mbin function calls and the arbitrary read-write of attributes, but deserialization is also an option in other cases, in other attacks. So let's look at JMX over HTTP. Someone at some point in time, probably JBoss, had the idea of hosting JMX over an HTTP protocol. Tomcat also has a JMX console built in by default. We also have third-party softwares such as Jolokia and Hautio, which allow you to call mbins from the Java application through HTTP. And in theory, this was made so that you don't have direct protocol deserialization. In JBoss, they managed to fail spectacularly at this because your payloads are ex-Java serialized something. So you can put serialized objects in there, but in the rest not. And also no mlets. I am 99% sure that you're not allowed to install mlets through any of these softwares, but I may be wrong, or you can prove me wrong, and I'm looking forward to your research then. And what we're interested in is that we can still call Java functions and modify attributes, so shenanigans. And we got to our destination, log4j plus JMX, and because I'm bad at math, there aren't 2 J's, there is just one. Log4JMX. So yeah, hey, he said the title. Okay, so log4JMX. If you think about it as a chart or as a visual representation, you have your log4j on one side, and you have your solution that exposes your mbins or your JMX via direct JMX protocols, Jolokia, Hautio over HTTP, and so on and so forth. If you happen to be in the intersection, then guess what? You are in the danger zone. Certified by Tom Hanks. Sorry, the other Tom. Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise. So, you're going to have a bad time. But we talked about the theory. Who is vulnerable? Who was out of the box vulnerable when I discovered this vulnerability? So, we can start strong with Apache ActiveMQ. We have Apache Artemis. We have James, the enterprise mail server. And we have Red Hat AMQ. And of course, last and least in this case, we have Alfresco. Wait, that's not the right one. No, that's not the right one. Okay, you get it. There are a lot of Alfrescos. The Alfresco software from Highland. So let's start with the Alpha and Omega, the Apache ActiveMQ and Alfresco. Starting with Alfresco, this Alfresco has a Docker compose. I like testing zero-day vulnerabilities on Docker environments because they are set up and they are officially configured how they should run by the vendors themselves, usually. So if you find something there, then it should replicate in all the software. So I installed the Docker image, actually the Docker compose images, which contains multiple Docker images, default credentials admin in the ActiveMQ interface exposed, and I found log4JMX there, just a casual Friday. And of course, if I wanted to initially report it to Alfresco, but then I was like, wait a minute, this is a default image. It has default credentials, it has no configuration which were modified. So what if the problem is actually in Apache ActiveMQ? So I got to testing Apache ActiveMQ. I got the CV from 2022. Again, I reported this in 2023. How I got the CV from 2 years ago is a bit beyond me, but let's go with it. It has a Jolokia, which exposes the JMXs, the mbins, not the JMXs. Anyway, default credentials, admin, because why not? Sometimes you will find other credentials on the internet, but if you get past the credentials, you can just get remote code execution, or you could get remote code execution in the past. They patched it, unfortunately. And of course, we have a Jetty server that supports JSP files. Of course, if you're thinking straightforward, we just write our own JSP in there, we just call it, and we get remote code execution. We have talked about this in the previous write file example. We just write our mul JSP in a relative path. The pattern will be runtime exec, nothing fancy about it. The whole XML should look like this. We need to escape some characters in order to have a valid JSON file out of it. actually a valid JSON value. We will put this in a Jolokia JSON, which calls our log4j object, our log4j class object. Anyway, the m bean with the setConfig text. And we're going to also add some other headers, HTTP headers required by Jolokia to work, such as authorization and origin. And the whole thing should look something like this. If executed correctly, you get a lot of winning, or in this case, remote code execution. So we prove that this works. And again, the system will probably run out of memory due to a size issue because we are winning too much. So Apache Artemis. In this case, again, another CV from Apache. I am very grateful. We have Hautio instead of Jolokia, but then again, Hautio comes with Jolokia packaged in it. We have in the case this is misconfigured, if you don't find something with, in the worst case scenario, it's not bad credentials or weak credentials, it's completely no credentials, which is the anonymous login enabled. We have a Jetty server, but in this case, we do not have any JSP support. So we're going to go for another straightforward attack to write our own war files and restart the server afterwards. Is it war? Anyway, what is it good for? Remote code execution. We also have an alternative exploiter for not able to write binary formats. We overwrite the broker XML file, and then we need to wait for the application or the server to restart itself. You can also expedite this process by just forcing the server to shut down with force failover, and then an admin should probably notice it and put it back up on his feet and giving us remote code execution. But we'll go for the war exploit. So we're going to go to Apache. This is the Artemis interface. It's a modification over Apache ActiveMQ. That's why the logo is Apache ActiveMQ. We're going to look for the Artemis home parameter, which in this case is home guest something something Artemis. And we're interested in the following things. We're going to write our log4j properties files because in this case we want to write a binary file and we cannot do this through XML. We're going to write in our file name the whole path to the file, which in this case is the Apache home plus web plus Artemis minus plugin war. Why the Artemis plugin war? Because it's a default war that comes with the application. And it's one of the few wars that gets automatically deployed when the Jetty server restarts itself. It doesn't have automatic deploy for other wars. So we need to overwrite an already existing one. And if we look in our pattern, we can see PK binary data for days over there, some text like webinf, webxml, and the PK stands for the header or the magic bytes for the zip archive. Yes, your web archive files are zips, and so are jars and so forth. Anyway, because we do not want to write this or to encode this in a JSON format, it's doable, you just /u it, but I didn't feel like coding for it. You can just host it from an FTP or an HTTP server. And you just point to it. Again, you overwrite config location URI with your malicious payload, and the configuration should load itself. The attack looks something like this. We hosted our FTP server. The user connected successfully and got our file. In the application, if we look closely at our log4j object, we can see that this layout is, again, pk something something webinf. Sorry, I do not read UTF-8. I only read Latin 1. And we have our rolling file, which is configured with the malicious pattern we're interested in writing. If everything was performed successfully, we can now restart the embedded server, which does not kill the Java application, but restarts Jetty. So it's going to destroy the current wars and going to load the new ones, which is our war. And we just need to curl it afterwards, after the server has restarted. So if we go to /Artemis plugin, guess what? Reverse shell. In this case, we have a reverse shell generated with MSF Venom. It's that simple, and it comes back on localhost port 44. And again, I like to run things as the least privileged user, so in this case, we're running as guest. So, Red Hat AMQ. It's about the same thing as Artemis. It has no CV, but it probably falls under the same CV as Artemis. And the concerning part is that Red Hat has not been replying to my mails. I have no animosity towards Red Hat. It's actually just slightly, barely positive because they bribed me with a coffee cup from a vulnerability I reported some time ago in Ansible Tower. But anyways, the mail thread goes something like this. 1 year ago, I tell them, hey, you have remote code execution, and here's a 10-page PDF of how to exploit it. About 4 or 6 months later, they show up with, yeah, are we still vulnerable? To which point I was absolutely drowning in work. And thanks to Alex Bogdan, we retested the vulnerabilities 2 months later, and we're like, yep, you're still vulnerable. I have still to receive an email response from that. I do not know if the latest version is vulnerable. I wash my hands off it. You can tell me if you find anything. So, misconfigured Artemis. It has Hautio as Artemis. It does not host JSP. It doesn't have JSP support. But the misconfiguration is that it allows scripts. So, as you remember, direct remote code execution. And the exploit, of course, we load a malicious configuration that has JavaScript in it. Do not be confused with JavaScript, but it's JavaScript, you get it. Anyway, we have seen this XML before, so we're gonna fly past it. We're just gonna runtime exec the ID command. It should look something like this. Again, we're gonna escape some characters for it to be a valid JSON. We're gonna put our whole HTTP command for the server to accept it. And of course, we get the following log, which we see nothing of it. So the parts of interest are the following. We can see that Nashorn is enabled in the first row. We can see in the red outline that our code has been successfully injected into the create script name RC whatever component. And it also warns us that the Nashorn engine will be removed from future JDKs. But the future is tomorrow. Today is remote code execution day. So we just execute it, and because this is a testing scenario, I just got the output and just wrote it in a console. If you're in a real-life attack, you just disable any login so that the blue team has nothing to work with, and you send yourself back a reverse shell or something less conspicuous. But yes, remote code execution. And Apache James. What about it? In this case, we have no CV because they had bigger fish to fry. You can picture Log4j in Apache James, something like this. They had a problem that their JMX had no authentication. So again, def by mlets. And also you can call these functions without requiring authentication. So that's bad for them. What was their solution? At runtime, if you don't have a JMX password.xml file, we're gonna automatically generate the password. But unfortunately, there was a problem with that as well because you had pre-authenticated deserializer. So you can have the strongest password in the world, but yeah, that's not gonna protect you. So yeah, they had bigger problems from that. And yes, these are my CVs. Although it doesn't write on the Apache James website because they do not have acknowledgements for the researchers that found them. Anyway, it's a direct JMX protocol. It's not over HTTP as it's been up until now. And it runs as the root user, usually. Why? Because we need access to ports for SMTP, POP3, and IMAP, which are these privileged ports. You can host a proxy and somehow the proxy runs with privilege, runs as root, and then you can map other ports which are non-privileged in order for the Apache James application to work, but it's a lot of work, and people do not like work, so just run it as root, it works. Because we are root, and because we can write text file anywhere we want on a Linux system, how about we just write a file to config-d? That's it. That's how simple it is. So when you're root, you get remote code execution instantly, or at least every minute. This is how a cron-d file should be like. If you haven't seen one until now, then enjoy. It has 5 stars, which is execute everything at 1 minute. The user, which in this case is root, the user we want to execute as. And this is just one of the many reverse shells you can do. In this case, I have ncat on the system, but you can look on Pentest Monkey or any other site to get a valid reverse shell through bash or through any other means. We're gonna write anywhere in cron-d our file. It doesn't even need to be writable because cron-d runs as root. You can have 000 privileges on it. It doesn't need to be executable. It doesn't need to have a specific name. It just has to have this valid format of 5 stars or whatever, the timestamp, the user, and the command to be executed. So the attack looks something like this. Because it's a direct JMX protocol, we can just use JConsole of the vulnerable system, or we can forward ourselves the port. So we're going to point it to a malicious HTTP server, which contains our configuration, in this case, localhost. It doesn't matter. It can be a remote host as well, or we can just use setconfig to write our whole payload. And the console, if we have access to it, should look something like this. So we are requesting the file from a remote location, which Log4j kindly reminds us that the URI does not represent a local file. that's not stopping me. Anyway, we get our layout builder, which has our pattern with the command we want to execute in cron. And we can see that a file manager has been successfully created for file etc cron mal. So everything works great. If the exploitation process is successful, it should look something like this. We have the HTTP header, which serves the XML to the victim, and then at every minute we should get back a reverse shell, or 1,000 reverse shells, because again we are continuously writing and whatever. We get reverse shell as root. We're happy. And with this, I am afraid we are all out of RCs, sir. And if you weren't paying attention, RCs are a type of cheese. So, on that bombshell, I say thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I may have answers. If you have answers, I have a lot of questions. I am probably more confused than you are. So, thank you. So, questions? Did I go too fast, or was everything so crystal clear? Okay. So, at least let's do this. Who enjoyed the presentation? Perfect. Do not forget to vote in the back. You can vote with red cards instead of green cards. Just write on them. It's actually green, but anyway. So, yes, thank you very much for attending. Again, Jason is in the other room. Maybe you can catch the final glimpses of him. And yes, hope you have a nice stay or a trip back home, a safe trip back home. Thank you.